Welcome to Alpha Wolf Capital. I'm Tim, and I want to personally thank you for stopping by. Between the OTC, New York Stock Exchange, and NASDAQ, there are over 22,000 companies traded publicly. I feel that small businesses are the backbone of America. The number one reason for this channel is to help small companies gain exposure with potential consumers, investors, even partners. Take, for example, today's guest, Brian Ostroff, president of Arianne Phosphate, one of the most prolific phosphate projects in the world. This company could be a big player in EV and battery power storage. They just received the end results of a pre-feasibility study, and Brian is here to share those results with you and how important they are to Arianne. It's important for you to understand that this is not a paid-for promotion. I do not collect compensation for the interviews I do here. I do look for companies that could potentially provide an above-average return on investment, but that is not the primary reason for the channel. There's a thing called impact investing. It's tied to environmental, social, and governance. I think that is a very narrow definition of what impact can be. By helping a small company become a large corporation, if you and I can become ambassadors of a product because the values of that company align with our own, think of all the jobs that will be created as that small company becomes a big company. Think about the community that that company is in. Typically, they thrive along with the company. This channel is to help companies that are relatively unknown become known so that they can build a following and they can have brand ambassadors that share their vision, share their mission, and are willing to do what they can to help have a positive impact on humanity. That's what this channel is all about. This video is for educational and entertainment purposes only. I am not a financial advisor. I recommend highly that before buying any security, you speak to a financial advisor and do your own due diligence. Hey everybody, Tim from Alpha Wolf Trading coming at you with a follow-up interview to a very interesting story that is taking a while to develop, but I think we're getting closer. I think we are getting closer. Brian Ostroff is here from Arianne Phosphate, ticker symbol DRRSF, to give us the results on the pre-feasibility study. Take it away, Brian.
First of all, you have Arianne and our Lac-a-Paul mine. So that would be the mine where we would mine and process our phosphate into a phosphate concentrate. And why don't we stay there for a moment, just as a refresher. So
let's just give everybody your position at Arianne is president, right?
Correct. So I've been with the company for some time in senior management. Previous to that, I was also a fair-sized investor, part of a fund that that had made investment in the company in early days and had been involved in subsequent rounds. So really that work was associated with, at the time, an early stage promising deposit of phosphate. And I guess over those years and through several rounds of funding, the project was able to move forward, ultimately becoming what is today the world's largest greenfield phosphate deposit. As well, the nature of the geology is a little different than most deposits. Most deposits are sedimentary. And by most, I mean over 90%. And the challenge with those deposits are they have deleterious elements in them, radioactive materials, heavy metals, cadmium, mercury, which ultimately, depending what you want to do with that phosphate, can be a little bit of a challenge. Now, in the case of Arianne, we have this rare deposit type, which is igneous. There's very few of deposits of those types. And in the case of Arianne, our phosphate concentrate doesn't have those deleterious elements, which I'm going to circle back around to because ultimately it's an important piece of why and where we are today. So ultimately, the project had moved forward, got bigger, had done a bunch of work. Again, we have this high purity, and I guess last but not least, it's situated in the province of Quebec here in Canada, obviously well known as a very favorable mining jurisdiction. And again, unlike most phosphate deposits, really coming from an area where you have strong comfort around security of supply, as opposed to today, most phosphate comes out of the Middle East and North Africa, some from Russia and China. So, as we had worked on the mine, all of that had progressed ultimately to receiving our permit. So at the mine, we are a fully permitted, shovel-ready project that had all these good characteristics that we had discussed. Now, the pre-fees to which you are referring, so we had announced a few months back that we were taking a look at the opportunity of going downstream. So the upstream mine, downstream processing facility that would ultimately take phosphate concentrate, take a phosphate input, and could turn it into phosphoric acid, which is the ingredient that is then used in anything from, your normal, dry bulk fertilizers like MAP and DAP, and all the way up through things like animal feed, specialty fertilizers, and then reaching higher levels that are required as a direct food additive, like in Coca-Cola or deli meats or things like that. And of course, now of interest, it's that high purity phosphoric acid that is used for LFP batteries. So the pre-fees was brought on to really study the opportunity of putting up a downstream purified phosphoric acid plant, PPA plant, in the Saguenay region of Quebec near our mine. So it would have access to high purity phosphate concentrate. Quebec has several of these igneous deposits, though none anywhere near as advanced, but would have access to that and the ability to turn that into a battery grade PPA.
Excellent. Now, you also wasn't phosphate also put on a critical materials list?
It was, yes. So actually, in late January, early February, Quebec had put phosphate, apatite, which is the phosphate bearing mineral, had put it on their critical mineral list. So at the time, having joined actually Ontario and the European Union. And then every few years, the Canadian government updates theirs. And the update was set for 2024. And to your point, I guess about a month ago or so, Canada had added phosphate to its critical mineral list. And it's interesting in terms of looking at the determinants that the Canadian government uses for their critical mineral list, but it's basically a mineral where security of supply could be challenged. It's a mineral where if Canada has it, they could not only use it to their benefit, but the benefit of their allies. And it's something that is necessary for the economy and in particular, a sustainable economy where you're looking to lower carbon emissions, etc. So, we've spent a bunch of time really educating the importance of phosphate. And so it's rewarding to see that the government has come in and acknowledges that phosphate is in fact a critical mineral.
So the feasibility study,
Yes.
who does it and why is it important?
Yeah. So, very good question, of course. So really, the logic was that, again, because of the nature of our phosphate, we could target higher ends of the phosphate end market. So again, you basically you look at phosphate in three tranches of product: dry bulk, MAP, and DAP. Kind of a second tiered good quality acid, which is used for animal feeds or specialty fertilizers like hydroponics or precision ag. And then again, at the pinnacle, you have really its use as a direct food additive or PPA used for the LFP battery. Now, the nature of your phosphate input is going to determine what you can basically make of it and in what ratios. So where your standard kind of sedimentary phosphate, assuming it is even of a decent quality, you'll be able to make kind of 1 unit at that top tier, 1 unit that second tier, and 8, 10, 12 units that third tier, which then needs to be turned into fertilizer. So one of the gating factors for those who are processing, say, a lower quality phosphate is for every unit of PPA that you want to make, you're going to be making a lot of fertilizer. And since most of the guys who would be in a position to expand their PPA operations, really their bread and butter is fertilizer, they're not going to want to flood the market of their primary product in order to try and produce a little bit more of that upper end product. Now, in the case of Arianne, because of the nature of our phosphate, we can really target those upper end products. So we can do the PPA, and we can do that second tiered acid, and as opposed to a ratio of say 1:10, we're looking at a ratio of roughly 2:10. So what that really means is the opportunity exists to target high-end markets without being burdened by having to get into the commodity type fertilizer markets where we would have to go to toe to toe with behemoths. So we could really carve out a niche. So the purpose of the pre-feasibility study was in fact to kind of do the math around setting up that downstream facility, and in particular setting it up in the Saguenay region of Quebec. So there's a whole lot of benefits there. Quebec is building out its own battery valley right now in Bécancour, Quebec, but being on the water, access to the automakers of Michigan or the Southeast US, Alabama, Kentucky, where a lot of these factories are being built out. So the study was done to take a look at that opportunity. The facility would produce 350,000 tons a year of that good quality, top quality PPA, and about 220,000 tons a year of that second tiered acid that again makes its way into animal feed. So ultimately this facility would be the largest of its type outside of China. And if the interest really is there for batteries, Western supply, integrated supply, security of supply, I think what that study shows is Arianne's going to be extremely well positioned to target that growing market.
So if you would not have, if you weren't going to do this downstream, typically it would be what? It would be that you would mine the phosphate and then ship it out to somebody that's going to go and do that's going to break it down into the different types of
Yeah. So, typically, um, you would really have a more, let's say, traditional business model where you would mine and produce the concentrate and then enter into offtake agreements with parties that would then buy that material and they would then turn it into an end product. So, again, look, obviously something that we could have done, and there'd be a lot of demand for it. But for us, we felt that the opportunity of setting up a downstream operation that would allow us to really target the output and have that we'd really be able to put ourselves in a place where even though the competitors were a lot larger than us, the nature of igneous phosphate really provides us a huge competitive advantage. And if anything starts to tip the scales in little old Arianne's favor.
okay. So the pre-feasibility study is going to give you okay, if we build this, then this is going to be our competitive advantage. It gives you kind of a whole picture of what your costs are going to be to build out the facility, right?
Yes.
And then then I would imagine takes into consideration selling prices for each product and how long it would take for you to recoup whatever investment is going to be required to lay out that capital.
Yeah, so why don't we walk through that first? I just for all the viewers, I would recommend going to our website or just pulling down the press release.
Okay.
Fairly lengthy and really goes into all the details and really the important determinants. So like you said, input price, output price, payback periods, what assumptions were used, etc.
So
But
if we can condense it down, I mean, if you can just break it down, where can they go to pull it up? They can go to your website and take a look at the press release.
yeah, go to our website. You have it up there on the screen, Arianne-Inc.com. Yeah, you can check out the press releases and all those details are there. But you know, look, the results were beyond excellent. So maybe we can start to talk through that.
All right. So just so I understand, I mean, this is some firm. Is this a firm that did this study? Somebody that somebody that was referred to you, or I mean,
Sure.
where did they come from?
Yeah, okay. So basically, we had three engineering firms involved in the work. So just on a high level, we basically looked at three aspects for the project. So
Okay.
there was the transportation of the material of the phosphate concentrate from the north shore of the Saguenay River to the south shore, which is where the facility would be put up at the port of Saguenay. So there was the work associated with that. There was the work associated with, and I want to come back to this because it's very important, but the sulfur, and you require sulfuric acid to make purified phosphoric acid. So we had another group do that work, and then ultimately the work around the acid plant. So both just making the phosphoric acid and then taking it up to a purified phosphoric acid. So three different engineering firms looking at all the aspects, really reviewing what's the best way to transport it, or how best to process the sulfur that you'll require. And we'll come back to that, etc. Yeah, and through that we got a global capex cost. So that for all components is 1.6 billion. And again, kind of took through the sizing and the scoping. So look, again, you're looking at a project that, I mean, I have to say personally, the results came out better than I had even expected. I mean, the math is pretty compelling. And again, we check off, and why don't we save the best for last, maybe the math, but maybe check off a couple of the other points. So, first and foremost, from an environmental standpoint. So this project really does touch off a lot of boxes. I mean, the upstream, the mine itself had already done that. It's pretty much going to be powered by hydroelectricity. The roads already exist, etc. But once you get down to a downstream asset. So as I had mentioned, you need sulfuric acid, and that's what you mix with phosphate, your phosphate concentrate, and that's what makes phosphoric acid. So one of the things that we reviewed was, do we want to bring in sulfuric acid for our facility, or do we want to build our own sulfur facility where we could take in raw sulfur, turn it into sulfuric acid ourselves? And so for a lot of reasons, that is the route that we're going. So from a safety standpoint, it's a whole lot better to be transporting sulfur rather than sulfuric acid. If there's spillage or anything like that, you're not spilling acid. Also, sulfur in its native forms about a third in terms of the volume. So, you have a lot less logistical aspects involved. So a plus. And then, when you take your sulfur and you turn it into sulfuric acid, you're producing a lot of heat, a lot of steam. And you can capture that steam through steam turbines and generate electricity. So in our particular case, this downstream facility will not require electricity, but will actually be able to provide electricity back into the grid. So, I mean, this thing, again, from an environmental standpoint, is a huge, huge plus. And of course, it does help the economics, not requiring electricity and then being able to sell some electricity back into the grid. So, it was pretty obvious to us that was the play. Although, look, again, not without the upfront capex involved in setting up your sulfur plant. But
And that's on top of, just so we're clear, that's on top of setting up the whole mining operation as well.
yeah, so that's a very good point. So right now, you're looking at two separate projects. So you have Arianne, the mine, Lacapal mine, and then you would have Arianne, a downstream facility where we would be building a plant that would take in igneous phosphate, So whether that would be from our mine or, if there was access to igneous phosphate from another facility, our plan is to build something that will process it and be able to provide that PPA to the industry. So, I think what you're getting at is by having the two projects, you do have two separate sets of math. So when we did our input costs and all of our math, we used an input cost of $213 a ton for the phosphate concentrate to come in. And as you might expect, your single biggest cost in making phosphoric acid, of course, is going to be the cost of your phosphate. So depending how that moves around, it's going to have a big effect on what your output cost is. So what we did was we, for our plant, assumed a $213 input price, which is consistent with, what the mine had used in its feasibility study to sell at. So at the mine level, just as a reminder for your viewers, at the mine level at $213 a ton, you were looking at $1.9 billion NPV 8. And so that kind of resides, let's say, in the left pocket. And then a downstream mine would be our right pocket, and whatever economics that generated would kind of stay in the right pocket. The point being that the right pocket isn't taking any money from the left pocket. What is interesting, of course, is even at that $213 a ton, our average price, cash cost of production was under $1,200 a ton. Now, according to Benchmark Mineral Intelligence, they consider anyone that can produce this stuff for under 1,400, actually, I think it's 1,450 a ton, as a low-cost producer. But it gets better than that. So, that roughly $1,200 cost, is for a product that in our model we put that we would be able to sell for $2,300 a ton, although the market today is higher than that. But, let's take a slight step back and talk about that tier 2 product. So that would be that material that's used for animal feed and specialty fertilizers. And calling it a tier 2 product maybe isn't a fair picture of what it is, because it is an important product and it's not tier 2 in any sense other than it sells at a lower price. But that product gets made just in the process of making that PPA. And so when I tell you that we have a cost of under $1,200, that is our total absolute cost. We get that second tiered product for free. So, in our study, we have us selling that product at about $1,200 a ton. That's free. That's right to the bottom line. So when we're talking about $1,200 cost for PPA, that's really $1,200 cost for PPA and that second liquid. So the economics are, again, phenomenal. You're looking at gross profits again in the neighborhood of about $800 million a year. And the mine still makes plenty of money as well. If the mine winds up being a seller of product to the downstream. Again, I would say for your viewers, they should go take a look at the press release, because in the press release, there is economic sensitivities and what we can sell the product for and how that will affect our profitability and what the input cost of phosphate is and how that will affect our profitability. So, I think these things are pretty key. But again, in the grand scheme of things, you're talking about something that is, a capex in the neighborhood of about 1.6, and something that should make, assuming the prices that we're using in the study, somewhere in the neighborhood of about, $800 million a year, 750 a year. So, pretty attractive, I would say.
Okay, so definitely sounds like a positive study. I look at things like this. This is a long-term plan, right? It's not going to happen overnight. You got to get the financing, then you got to get them built, right? I mean, this is going to be probably a couple of year process, maybe 2-3 years, right?
Yeah, I think that's
And
yes.
I guess, if you're a long-term investor and you're thinking 2-3 years out, not a big deal. If you have been in the stock for a while and you really want to see some action, how does this study impact it today? I would suggest maybe that if Arianne is in discussions with any potential dance partners, this study would be beneficial in valuing what the assets are that you have. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. At the end of the day, you're looking at a pretty serious project here. I mean, very, very, very good economics, but no question, this is a big project, and it's going to require partner or a couple of partners to help finance that. Again, going back to with phosphate now on the critical mineral list, it should allow for some financial incentives from the government, etc. But yeah, this is going to require a partnership. And so those conversations, of course, are underway. Look, again, you're talking about the world's largest, purest, safest, and now with the intention of going downstream to make that product that we will all need for LFP batteries. And, of course, we're on a lot of people's radar screen. So those
So just to
conversations.
highlight that fact, I mean, you and I have had conversations about the benefits of LFP, longer cycles, right? Safer, not the worry of
More
thermal runaway.
cycles, materials, a little bit more environmentally friendly. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why the LFP, today is
And you're starting to see announcements of companies. Geely is one that I can think of where, basically 50-year lifespan is what they're claiming on their LFP battery because of the cycles and the whole thing. You're starting to see a lot more companies start talking about LFP, right? Geely's a Chinese company. So, uh, you and I have talked before about the fact that China controls 90% of the materials that go into batteries. Energy storage is going to, without question, I don't care what happens with cars. Energy storage is still going to be a huge priority. LFP has shown to have big benefits in that space. Now you have a feasibility study of how, building a downstream facility. I think this gets this. You have a shovel ready project, which you've had, and I just keep looking at the fact that the window in time for the energy needs that we are going to have, right, continues to shrink. That's what I look at. That window just keeps getting smaller It's whether we get there by 2035, whether or not we're all electric, it doesn't matter. It's coming. This is where we're going, right? And whether we're to build the infrastructure and all this other stuff, there are a lot of people that are naysayers and saying, "Well, it's never going to happen." And I'm one of them. I'm like, we got a lot of work to do right now. I mean, we should have started 2 years ago, but you know, it is what it is, and who knows? Maybe new technology comes out that changes things. I don't know. I can't predict the future. Fusion, I mean, there's all this stuff, right? Who knows what's going to happen? All I know is that that window continues to shrink, and you are sitting in probably, would you say, the best position you've ever been in?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think that, certainly as a result of this report on top of all the other work that we've done and permitted mine and what have you, I think what the pre-feasibility report really does is it kind of makes fact certain everything that we have thought and have been saying is in fact accurate. It attaches, again, I think, extremely robust economics. And look, there may be those out there that differ, but really, certainly in the West, Arianne is the preeminent project, period. And that pre-fees, continues to demonstrate that. And in the time that we've been working forward on this, I think the LFP continues to establish itself as the technology. It's projected that by the end of this decade, the LFP battery will be the most widely used of all the battery chemistries. And really, I don't think it's going to take till 2030. I think we're getting pretty close right around now. And Tim, I just want to touch on a couple of things that you brought up, which is timelines and naysayers and what have you. And look, obviously with every technology, truly understanding what the rate of growth is, we don't know. Is it going to grow at 20% a year or is it 60% a year? The reality is we don't know. Tesla comes up a little shy on their numbers, and all of a sudden everyone freaks out and the EV is dead, and let's put this science project to bed. I completely disagree. And
Yeah.
and
So just so we can clarify this, yes, they slowed down for a quarter or maybe 2 quarters. They're still growing at 40%.
right. And that was my point, right? It's not like them growing or EVs growing slower than expected means that you're getting negative growth. All right. So like the path is absolutely clear, but and you touched on this as well, which is energy storage. So I think that's a point that a lot of people miss in regards to the LFP. So look, people are going to hold whatever views they're going to hold on the EV, and is it for real or is it not, and rate of growth and best technology. And the answer is we don't know, other than I think we're all pretty certain that the growth is going to be there. The trajectory, time will tell. But energy storage systems. So the LFP, because of a lot of its attributes, is ideal for energy storage in small scale. I mean, not at a hydro dam, but at substations and certainly at the home. So as more and more people look and put, solar panels on their roof and what have you, it's great to capture the energy, but you need to store it. And so here are some fairly amazing statistics. So of energy storage systems that are out there today, Do you know that almost 80% of them are already LFP? So you definitely have that entrenched market and the understanding that the LFP is the way to go for energy storage. But then you start to look at the projections of the energy storage market, and you will need 5 times the amount of LFPs that are in energy storage today. You need 5 times just to meet what's going to be in energy storage by 2030. And, depending what analysis you read, I've seen anywhere between 30 and 55% of all LFPs are going to actually be used in energy storage. So, I think that it's important for people to understand the two components of the LFP battery market, and understand that if, EVs come up shy 1/4 in one company's earnings, it's almost insignificant in terms of what demand for LFP is going to be.
And here, that means you're going to need a lot of phosphate, right? Pure, high purity phosphate. You're going to need a lot of that stuff. So that's why I keep saying that window just keeps getting smaller, right?
Yeah.
Because you've still got to build out the mine, you got to build, and then the downstream supply. I mean, you got to build all that out. That's going to, we just said it's going to take 2-3 years. So if you're going to, the longer whoever is, I think probably the biggest concern that investors would have in Arianne right now is that you can't find a partner that is gonna help you, that's got the bankroll and the strength to be able to do this without breaking a sweat, right?
Yeah.
That I think is the biggest concern, because then it becomes okay, they're probably going to do a capital raise and dilute the shit out of all the shareholders. That is the problem right now. That is the only reason this stock, I think, is sitting where it's sitting today.
Yeah.
If there is if that dynamic changes, I think you see a dramatically higher stock price when there is some clarity around what Arianne is going to need to do in terms of raising capital to build out these two wonderful things.
Yeah.
Right.
Look, there's no question that when you look at, Project One has a $1.9 billion NPV, and Project Two, it's not a mining project. So in terms of what you can say, but if you were to kind of just do an NPV on the projected earnings year over year, you're over twice that 1.9. So, you sit there, and obviously sitting on whatever it is, $6 billion in NPV and a market cap of $60 million. The market is telling you there's a little bit of doubt here. The irony is, if we had a $1 billion market cap, and people could say, oh, this isn't going to be a problem to build and finance, we probably have a $3 billion market cap, because they're on their way to making 800, 900, $1 billion a year. So even at a $3 billion market cap, it's cheap. But the reality, as you point out, is we're a $60 million market cap. And that means we are dependent upon, a partner. And that is ultimately, look, the route we want to go, because to your point, I want to go issue 500 or a billion shares in order to finance this thing. So, the conversations that we're having with potential partners are on a project level, that we are looking to fund this thing on the project, and that Arianne current shareholders would be left with, X% of the mine and X% of the downstream facility. And, not be in a position where it would have to issue a lot of stock. And I think that if we are able to put a deal like that together, to your point, I just think that the valuation, it would be just an entirely different ballgame. People would see that the project's getting built, so therefore crystallizing that kind of money, and would also see that we're not on our way to issuing 1 billion shares, and dilution's well under control. And so you'd really kind of have the double whammy.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you, you and I have had this conversation before. Brian, I'm sure you've had offers, and you probably have rightfully said that is not the deal we're looking for. We're looking for the right deal, and you can be patient enough to wait for that deal, right? And I think as more and more pieces come together, the feasibility study being the last piece to drop, that shows that you're not out there, making all this stuff up. This is a real project, shovel ready to go. I think you just keep building the case that this is the real deal. At some point, that real partner, I think, will show its face, or partners, and then we'll see what happens. But I can tell you this: I would think that the stock price will react prior to that news being officially released, because that's just how the market works.
Yeah, look, I consider myself a scholar of the markets, and I have to say that I've given up trying to read the markets, before, after, during. Look, in all honesty, I have zero understanding of how our company could possibly be trading at the valuation that it is.
The thing is this isn't the only company.
No, I agreed, but it's the only
it's
company
the entire
I'm not
market
a
right now.
shareholder of, so that's the one that
I know, but it's the whole small micro cap market right now. Rising interest, the environment that we're in, the rising interest rates, and I mean, just about every day now I'm seeing companies that are filing for bankruptcy, right? I mean, Lumber Liquidators, this will be their second time going down that path. Their Bob's Furniture Store, that's I guess that's big back east. Filing bankruptcy. I mean, this is the environment we're in, from the debt that these companies have, and that's again goes back to the concerns of the capital raises that these companies might do, right? Get themselves, or the debt that they might take on to try and do some of these projects, and then look what happens in a rising interest rate environment, right? The debt puts these companies in a lot of trouble. So, I mean, that's where we're at. Does it make sense? No, it doesn't make sense. Do I think it's gone too far to one side? Absolutely. I mean, Apple's hitting a new high today. They'll be able to, $3 trillion valuation. They'll be able to buy like 20 countries pretty soon. Right? I mean, it's insane, but it will come back. I know that it will turn, unless this is the end of the world. If it's the end of the world, it doesn't really matter, because it's the end of the world.
Well,
So
if it's the end of the world, maybe Apple shouldn't be trading at a $3 trillion market cap. So
maybe,
one way or another.
but the bottom line is there are a lot of interesting, amazing companies out there that provide products or services, or could provide products or services that impact humanity in a positive way. This would be one of those stories, right? We are going to need phosphate for one thing or another. Food is important, last time I checked. So we've got an incredible story here that you have been very patient with. I think the pieces that can continue to come out just verify the fact that this is a real project. This is a really exciting project, and one that's needed. for us in the western part of the world, right? I mean, this is what we need. This,
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely. We need this.
we need this. This isn't a want. This is a need. And at some point, I think the people that believe in the story, Brian, how long have you been with the company? How long have you been suffering through this? Seriously,
Well,
suffering through it.
suffering. So I've been part of senior management now for 8 years.
Okay. NVIDIA CEO said the other, this was a few weeks ago, or he actually said,
Sorry, what company was that?
NVIDIA,
Do I know them?
the little company,
Right.
that basically he said, they do really hard stuff at NVIDIA. They tackle very hard problems. And the reason they do that is because of the fact that they are tackling such a difficult thing that will limit the amount of competition that you have because no one else wants to do it.
Yeah.
And then he said, those that are willing, that can suffer the longest will ultimately be the most successful. Right? So you've been suffering for a while, but I think ultimately, as long as you don't give up, you will be there. It will come. You will be successful, and it will all be worth it. You look back and say, "Yeah, it sucked at that time, but look, damn, look at what we're doing, right?
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
are making a difference in the world right now."
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, so Brian, I want to thank you because I got to cut this off because this guy was telling me my interviews are way too long, right? So I'm going to cut you off.
I wonder
I'm
who
going to try
that
and
was.
shorten my interviews up a bit.
There
Okay.
you go. There you go. All right. Well, for those who bet on the over under on the hour, I guess the under paid off by a couple of minutes.
All right, Brian. Look, let's do another follow up when you have another little piece of news. Hopefully
Absolutely.
soon, right?
Sooner's better than later.
Sooner is better than later. I appreciate you taking the time to update everybody.
I appreciate the interest, the ongoing interest in following the story, and alerting your viewers on what we got going on.
All right, Brian.
All right.
We'll see you next time. Hold on a second. I'm going to shut this off. Thanks for tuning in to another interview here at Alpha Wolf Capital. Today we had Brian Ostroff, president of Arianne Phosphate. I hope you enjoyed today's interview, and if you did, do us a favor, give us a like. How about giving us a share? And while you're at it, make sure you smash that subscribe button. All of those things are extremely important to us, and we appreciate you taking the time to do that. Until next time, stay safe. Alpha Wolf Capital wishes you the very best of success.